Welcome, everyone, back to the Cake and Batter podcast. I am Jake, and we are also joined by Cole, like always.
Hello.
And today we are going to be talking about The Hateful Eight. Hopefully, you saw our last podcast talking about I Am Mother. And if you did, then you probably saw The Hateful Eight for this episode. Just like last time, we will be getting into a whole lot of spoilers. So make sure that either you saw the film or that you don't care.
All right.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just waiting for you to start trying to stop the silence.
This is a wonderful podcast already.
Well, I mean, we've really only started. We're only about a minute in, so.
So, all right. So yeah, hopefully y'all have seen The Hateful Eight, and let's go ahead and get into it. Written and directed by my favorite filmmaker, Quentin Tarantino. I don't know how you feel about him, Cole. I know you haven't seen every single one of his films, but how do you feel about him from the movies that you've seen?
Well, from the movies I've seen, which are pretty much just Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, and The Hateful Eight, I would probably say that I like Quentin Tarantino. Is he my favorite filmmaker? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, that's completely up for debate. More or less, just like I feel like I haven't seen all of it. Since I haven't seen all of his movies, I don't think I can make a clear and concise like choice on whether or not he's my favorite. But he certainly, I don't think there's been a movie of his that I've watched that I have not enjoyed thoroughly. And it's very hard to get me to watch movies more than once, because if I see a movie once, I can pretty much remember it, and I never really have to watch it again. But I guess for Quentin Tarantino, his movies have like a rewatchability to them, to where I feel like I can watch the movie again, and I can be just as enthralled and just as brought into the movies themselves, without having to worry about, whether or not I'm going to get bored watching the movie.
Right.
And I think Hateful Eight is definitely not an exception to that.
I completely agree. The Hateful Eight is a lot of people were disappointed with The Hateful Eight. I think it really still is a masterpiece in his body of work.
Yeah, I definitely think I have to agree with you with that, because I love that movie. Is awesome. Like, I had no issues with that movie. That movie was really, really good.
So even at clocking in at like 3 hours, it still doesn't even feel like it.
No, it really doesn't. You can sit. I mean, it's strange the way that the movie is, because you're sitting there and you're watching the movie and you think that just a couple, like, 30 minutes have passed, and then you look at the clock, after you're done watching the movie, and you're like, wow, it's really been 3 hours? I've sat around for 3 hours watching this movie? I was completely baffled when I saw the film. I think you were more lucky than me when it comes to watching the movie, because you got to see it during its roadshow.
Yeah, I did. For those of you who don't know, The Hateful Eight, when it came out back in 2015, Quentin Tarantino decided to go all out, and he had what he called a roadshow presentation, and it played for only 2 weeks in a certain amount of theaters, and it was longer. There was about 15 or so extra minutes in the film, and there was also there was an overture before the film even began, so it played music for about 6-7 minutes before it even began, and in the middle there was a 15-minute intermission as well. And it was certainly an experience. I saw it at Music Box Theater in Chicago, and it was certainly a great experience. I know it sounds a little corny to say that it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had, but I did have a great crowd that I saw it with at Music Box, so I'm happy to say that it actually was one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah, so before we go into those 15 minutes that you got to see that I didn't, I think we should probably go over the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
So, The Hateful Eight takes place after the Civil War, during like when the Wild West was still like a thing. And it follows, it's more, I think it's more of like an ensemble movie, really.
It is,
like
definitely.
there really isn't a character that takes priority over everybody else. I think that every character has the same amount of weight to them.
They really do, and that's actually what makes the film really pop off the screen, in a sense.
Yeah, but the first character you start with is what is his ranking?
Major Marquis Warren?
Yeah, Major Marquess Warren. You see him first, and he's in the middle of the road with a bunch of dead bodies, and he hails down a stagecoach that's on their way to the town of Red Rock.
Or Red Rock.
It's Red Rock. And when he eventually convinces the people to let him ride with him, because he finds out that he's actually met the guy in the stagecoach before, and they're both bounty hunters. Yeah. And he is carrying along a live bounty because his handle, or like his calling, is the hangman. And his whole shtick is that if you get caught by him, normal bounty hunters will kill you when it says wanted dead or alive. They'll just kill you and bring you back because it's easier to transport you. But the hangman believes in justice and wants nothing more than to watch you get hanged. So if you get caught by the hangman, you're going to hang. You're not going to die from a bullet in the back of the head. He thinks that that's too good for criminals. And they end up getting caught up in a blizzard and have to stay at an inn. Is it an inn?
It's a haberdashery. Yeah.
It's a haberdashery. And they end up getting caught up in a haberdashery for 2 days while they're waiting the blizzard out. But when they get there, things aren't really what they seem.
Yeah, so they end up meeting with obviously a few strangers at the haberdashery who really no one is trusting of anyone in this film. That's really what this film is about. It's about the truth. You know, who is lying, who is who, and what is what. That really is the actual point of this movie, because it really is a whodunit at its core.
Yeah, and I mean, there's even clues for the viewer to figure out throughout the movie. You know, there's some shots that seem kind of out of place are showing off clues to when you find out about probably 2/3 of the way through, you find out what happened and you see how the rest of it plays out.
Right.
But you don't get the whole, it's not like, there's not a lot of dramatic irony in this movie, which I think we mentioned. Did we mention it when we were talking about I Am Mother? Did we mention dramatic irony?
Yeah, we talked about it a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so there is some dramatic irony to the movie, but it only really comes in once all the pieces have been laid out. So you still know about as much as the characters in there do, until it's relevant to the story. But you can figure out what is going on throughout clues through the movie, through character conversations, certain pieces of the set that seem out of place. You know, for instance, there is a part of the movie where one of the characters is walking to the table with food, and they stop and they look under their foot, and there's a jelly bean in between the floorboards, which you don't end up finding out that the strangers that are at the haberdashery are actually part of the posse that the bounty that the hangman is trying to bring in, and they killed everybody there and held the place up, and you see them knock down candy and stuff like that, and that's just one of the pieces that they forgot to clean up.
Yeah, it's that the jelly bean is, you know, it's one of the first little pieces you see in the film that makes you just go, what happened here, you know?
Yeah, and, you know, watching it on your first time through, you don't understand the significance of the jelly bean, but you understand that there's something amiss from the way that the place looks, because the place is pretty much clean, but if everything's clean, then why would there be a single jelly bean in between the floorboards that somebody missed? especially
Exactly.
because the color is so contrasting to the floor itself, with the floor being brown and the jelly bean being red.
It the talking about the jelly bean. In addition to the jelly bean, the one of my favorite things that isn't even talked about. I like to talk about how much I love the dialogue in this film, but before we get to that, one of the most visual things that I like about this film is another piece of the puzzle of putting the tarps and the blankets and stuff over the chair.
Oh yeah. After they kill his name is Sweet Dave, right?
Yeah, after they kill Sweet Dave. And they do that just to cover up the blood and hoping,
that nobody will notice, but it takes Warren, who's been there before,
like 2 seconds.
He's eventually the one to figure out the puzzle. But I think he always had an inkling in the beginning because what is his name? Is the character's name Bob, or is that his actual name?
Well, no, that's not his actual name. Is in the end you find out Marco the Mexican.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but we call him Bob. Bob.
Bob is the name of the guy that's quote unquote taking care of the place while Sweet Dave and Minnie are quote unquote out of town. And Samuel L. Jackson's character Warren is always very skeptical, and you can see it in the conversations that he has with Bob. Especially I automatically had a feeling that Bob, or that Minnie and Sweet Dave were pretty much confirmed dead through the conversation that Samuel L. Jackson had with Bob in the stable when they first get there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. Because it talks about it was I could feel it through the dialogue. You could see Bob's gears turning when Samuel L. Jackson cornered him a couple times in that conversation.
Yeah. I thought maybe I didn't know if they were dead, but I of course, I was, thinking something's up first time I saw it, but I didn't know, are they dead, or they just, did they do something to them? I wasn't sure.
See, I didn't know that everybody in the haberdashery were all part of a posse. That was the thing that I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I did know that Bob did something to either get rid of Minnie and Sweet Dave. And I mean, it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like, nobody gets... I don't think there's very many Quentin Tarantino movies where people get where side characters get kidnapped or trapped or tied up. From the ones that I've seen, I can't remember. And the only time, in Kill Bill, the bride gets trapped. But
she's the main character.
She's the main character, so she's going to make it out. But, just having it being a Quentin Tarantino movie, I automatically kind of knew. I'm like, well, Quentin Tarantino is going to... Obviously, somebody's going to die.
Right.
So...
When it comes to Quentin Tarantino movies, there's always a part in your brain when you're watching the movie, knowing that it's a Quentin Tarantino movie kind of helps you move the story along in your head, because you almost know what style it's going to take. You may not know what
the plot is going to be, but you automatically, you always have an inkling. It's like when you're playing bingo and you have that free space in the middle.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of like it being a Quentin Tarantino movie, you're always expecting some over the top violence, right?
Yeah.
And that's what definitely helps when you're watching, because it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
You just don't know when.
You don't know when, or you don't know why it's gonna happen.
And speaking of over the top violence, I think one of the parts that really just caught me way off guard was when Channing Tatum shot Warren right in the crotch.
Yeah,
right before right at the end of chapter 4, wasn't it? Right.
Right at the end of chapter 3.
What? Oh yeah,
before the intermission.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, because chapter 4 is where they talk about how the haberdashery got held up. But yeah, right there was just to be honest, like like going through the credits, you see that Channing Tatum's going to be in the movie. But I was so enthralled with the movie, I totally forgot that he even existed as a character. So by then, I had no idea that Channing Tatum was hiding under the floorboards until he shot Samuel L. Jackson in the crotch. And then it goes under the floorboards and it shows him. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, he's in the movie. I forgot.
Yeah, it's funny when you see those opening credits, and you see all the great famous names, and then all of a sudden you see Channing Tatum. When I first, I'm like, something doesn't fit right here. One of these doesn't belong. That's what I was thinking.
It's really funny how much of a minuscule role he plays in the film.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even. Do you think that like Quentin Tarantino picked Channing Tatum to play that role because he likes Channing Tatum as an actor, or because like wasn't 2015 kind of the area where Channing Tatum was like in a lot of movies?
So actually what had happened is Channing Tatum had gotten word that Quentin was making a new movie, and Channing Tatum just spammed Quentin's phone like no other because he wanted the role in the film. And he annoyed Tarantino to the point where he just said, "Fine." Wow. And he got the role in the movie.
And you can kind of see like that resentment because he's in the movie for like 1 minute before he gets his brains blown out by Samuel L. Jackson. And I was like, huh. You know, I kind of expected him to be there longer, but now looking back on it and hearing that story, you can totally tell. You can totally tell that like Quentin's like, I'll give you your goddamn role. I'll give you your role. You want your role? Fine. Here it is. 2 pages. You happy?
I love when he sticks his head out and he says hi to Daisy, and it's
like this heartfelt moment.
And then just you see his head explode from the back all the way to the front. And the blood spatter all over Daisy.
Yeah, and then she's like, he was surrendering. And then Warren's like, well, he took too long.
Yeah. that has to be, you know, out of all things I sometimes expect from Quentin Tarantino, I didn't expect that. That was something else.
It was surprise right after surprise in that one.
It was.
Like, there were so many, like, I don't even know if I would call them powerful, just, like, intense scenes. Scenes that had me on the edge of my seat, like, throughout the entire film. Like, there were some, like, moments of reprieve, you know, where the characters have, like, you know, parts where they're just kind of doing nothing.
Yeah.
But then but those are spaced out, so those scenes that you get into, like, you really just, ooh, that just, I was totally invested into those scenes.
Speaking of scenes that, you know, are kind of intense versus powerful, one scene in particular that I love in the movie, because it slows down the tempo from all the quick, witty dialogue and the monologues, which, of course, I love. You know, Quentin Tarantino writes some of the best dialogue in film today, but he also crafts some of the best just nothing scenes. And I think the best scene in the movie has to be when Daisy is playing the guitar.
Oh yeah.
And because it slows down the tempo for about 5-6 minutes, and you just listen to her play the guitar. But you had that voiceover a minute earlier, letting you know that something was gonna happen, letting you know that someone poisoned the coffee. Yeah. And so all that time of listening to that really slow scene of her just singing and playing the guitar, all the while you're thinking, but I know someone poisoned the coffee. Someone's gonna get sick. Someone's gonna die. Something's gonna happen. What's gonna happen? You know, and having her play the guitar while with that dread underneath, I think is the best part of the film.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Definitely, that's a scene. I think, and going back to like poisoning the coffee, right? Like when you first saw the movie, who do you think did it? Before you found out that it was the one guy.
I was on Chris Mannix's team. I thought it was the ugliest one in the room. I thought it was Joe Gage. You know, Michael
so
Madsen.
You were right. He owned up to poisoning the coffee, didn't he?
He did. But even though he owned up to it, it's still not clear who did it.
Right.
Because he owns up to it.
It's obviously one of them because they're all on the same team.
Right.
See, for a minute, I thought it was Chris Maddox.
You did?
Yeah, mostly because Chris Maddox, like, he just hated Warren at the beginning of the film. He was always trying to antagonize Warren, you know, and for some, and I mean, like, and obviously, you know, he has that background. He's got that background of his dad being the leader of, you know, army of rebels, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that he was under the impression that, you know, he could kind of do the same thing, you know, and I don't know, just for some reason I thought it was Chris Mannix.
You know, Chris Mannix is probably the most interesting character out of them all.
Yeah, because
I think he's the most interesting because there's this dynamic, right? You know, he says he's sheriff. He's the new sheriff of Red Rock because the last one got shot, and they're getting there. He's got to get there to hang the guy who shot the last sheriff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, no one believes him because he comes from a family of criminals. And it's just such an interesting dynamic because you can't really figure out if he's telling the truth or not.
Do you think, personally, that he was telling the truth?
I'm indifferent. I think, on one hand, I think he does because of the way he acts, right? Because clearly Chris has this, like, he has this tenacity towards Marquis, right, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, he's always trying to antagonize Warren.
He hates him, and he tells a story about how Marquis, you know, blew up an entire building.
Burnt down. He burned down an entire compound.
Right,
including some of his own men.
Right, filled with soldiers, including his own men, and he hates that about him. And not only that, but there's certain qualities that come off Chris that of course make him seem like a racist, which would make him hate Marquis, right?
Yeah.
Especially since he has such a love for General Sandy Smithers.
Yeah.
You know? But when it comes down to it, he helps Marquis in the end, right? Like a good sheriff should.
And I think that, like, throughout the movie, Chris kind of starts to judge people not based off of, you know, their past and what they look like, but more based off of their character and their sense of justice. Because, you know, Chris could have outright just tried to kill Warren right then and there, but he doesn't. And it takes him to the end of the movie to realize that, you know, to actually go in and give justice where justice is due. Because he stops at the end when he's about to shoot Daisy, and Warren's like, hang on, man. She was captured by the hangman. Shooting her in the head's not good enough. And he's like, you're right. She needs justice.
Yeah.
And then they hang her. And I think that scene just had me grinning from ear to ear at the end of it. Because it's like, you see all this BS that they go through, you know, and you also, in that same scene, you see Chris kind of learn something throughout his entire time there when he calls Daisy's bluff.
Yeah.
So that by that time he's grown as a character, because he probably if new shiny Chris would have shown up then, he would have outright been, he would have outright probably thought Daisy was telling the truth.
Yeah.
But it takes him that time at the haberdashery to learn what it means to be a sheriff.
Right, and that's I think that's what I think it's what ultimately changes his character, because you also see him talk to what's his name, Oswaldo, Tim Roth's character.
Yeah, the British guy.
Right. And you see him talk to Oswaldo, and they look at the handbill for the guy who shot the last sheriff.
It's the same exact, and it follows Chris's story.
Right. But it's how would he know, and why would he care if he wasn't sheriff,
Right.
And in the end, he gets the satisfaction of doing the hanging himself. Which is, on one hand, he's delivering justice like the sheriff's job. That's the sheriff's job. And second, he's also delivering that justice by his own hand, which he shouldn't be doing, though, because when Oswaldo has a little monologue about frontier justice versus societal justice, right?
Yeah.
And which is a very interesting monologue, but that it comes up in the end scene because it's borderlining between frontier justice and societal justice, talking about what they did earlier, because he's doing his job to deliver justice, but the other hand, he's doing it by his own hand and doing it out in the frontier and not doing it through the court like he should be.
Yeah, and I think that I think this brings up a good case, coming back to who is the main character of this movie. And I think that there is a pretty good case that if there had to be a main character for the Hateful Eight, I think it would be Chris Maddox.
Really? I would say it would be Marquis.
I mean, it could very well be Marquis too, but I feel like Chris Maddox follows pretty close to the hero's journey almost.
How so?
Well, I mean, there's the call, which is where Chris gets on the stable coach, right?
Yeah.
And then he's in his gosh, I wish I had the paper that said the hero's journey, because I don't remember all the names.
Don't be all textbook on us.
I know, but I feel like I'm sounding really dumb. But there's the call to adventure, right? The stagecoach. He gets there, and now he's out of his comfort zone. He leaves, his home, which is on the road. He gets there. He meets all the people. He comes close to death with the coffee, right?
Yeah.
He goes into the belly of the beast when once he realizes he's in the belly of the beast is when Warren shoots Sandy Smithers, right?
Yeah.
The monologue about justice and societal, frontier justice and societal justice is the advice from the wise man. Almost.
Okay, I can see that.
And then his weapon, he gets, what is it when the hero gets the strength to defeat the evil? What is that called? There's a name for it.
I don't know.
But that strength is when he calls the bluff.
Okay.
Because he doesn't know.
Yeah.
But he's calling the bluff anyways. And then the return trip home is, is him dying, or it's implied that he dies, but like the hanging is right before the return trip home.
Okay, yeah.
Like he follows. It's not an exact path,
Yeah.
but it's close to the hero's journey. And I feel like, and I mean Warren doesn't have as many of those doesn't hit as many of those beats that Maddox does.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that I think if I had like more time and I could watch the movie again and I could really like sit down and take notes, I think that there's a pretty good case for Chris Maddox being the protagonist of the Hateful Eight. He's the hero.
I guess I could see that now. Yeah, I definitely see that now. Now that you bring up, I guess the hero's journey, it does make a lot of sense. I mean, whether he is or isn't, Walton Goggins steals the show as Chris. He really does.
Yeah.
He steals the show.
He is like you start by hating him and you kind of learn to love him by the end of it. And I'm not saying that Chris needs to be the protagonist, but like hypothetically, if there's a case for it. But I think the movie, I think the movie definitely works as a really good ensemble film, because not all movies need to have a protagonist. Because it's not like each character is insignificant. There's no side characters in the Hateful Eight.
Well, OB.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even he plays. Actually, you really don't know anything about Obi.
Right. It's fun. It's funny because it's called the Hateful Eight, but Obi's there, so technically it's the Hateful Nine.
Yeah, but I guess he doesn't count because he's just the stagecoach driver.
Right.
Because then there's Minnie and Sweet Dave too. They're part of it, but they're not really hateful, are they?
True, but I mean, like,
they're
Obi
more of a
is
bystander.
There. Obi is there when everyone else is, Minnie and Sweet Dave aren't, But
it's the Hateful Eight with a bystander of 1.
Right. The Hateful Eight plus 1.
Right.
Let's talk about, other characters, though. Stuff that they're the actual side characters. I think this is one of the few movies where the side characters have just as much characterization as the main ones. There's Minnie, who feels like you know her the entire movie when you only get like 10 minutes with her.
Not even 10 minutes.
Yeah, and you
like,
get
like
so
one
much.
Conversation with her.
It tells you you get a sense of who she is as a person from just less than 10 minutes with her, and I love that.
You also learn a lot about Minnie based on what Wallace tells Bob, too.
Warren.
Oh yeah, that's right, Warren. Sorry, I got the names mixed up. My bad. Yes. You learn more about who Minnie is too before you even get to see Minnie, when she's alive, based on what Warren tells Bob and him calling Bob out.
True, but seeing her in that flashback sequence makes her stand out. It makes her memorable because she has so much chemistry, with everyone else. And the writing of her character is off the wall. It's off the charts good because you feel like you know her, and then it's hard to get less than 10 minutes with a character and feel bad that someone killed them.
Yeah.
And yet you feel awful that you're seeing her die.
Yeah, and like that's the thing that I was talking to one of my family members about earlier today. Is that if a character dies in a movie, it won't have as much of an impact if I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Because my sister's been bothering me all summer to watch the newest season of Stranger Things, and this is part of the conversation, and I'm not going to go too far into it. But she keeps talking about this one character. Spoilers for Stranger Things season 3, if any of you care. But she keeps talking about this one character named Alexei.
Yeah.
And I don't know who this guy is. And then when I finally get to him, I'm like, oh, he's just some Russian dude that they kidnapped, and he's in there for, 2 episodes, and then he gets shot?
Yeah.
I didn't... Like, there's nothing to this character that I actually... Like, that made me care enough to be upset or saddened when he died. I was like, oh, he's here? Oh, he's gone. And that's the thing. You can't kill somebody off unless you make the audience. You can't kill somebody off and have the emotional impact that you want if you don't have the audience care about the character first.
I agree. One of the best things that makes you care is how happy Minnie is, and I love her interaction with Sweet Dave, and Jody says "we" to her when she asks if he speaks French, and he says "we," and she says to Sweet Dave, "Honey, ask me if my ass is fat." And he says, "What?" And she says, "Just ask it." And he says, "But it is." And she says, "Just ask me." and he goes, "Is your ass fat?" And she goes, "Oui." And just from that little conversation, you're already smiling. You already love her.
Yeah, because it's already you get the relationship between these characters. And like, speaking of flashback characters, a character that confused me as to like almost why they were there was Sandy Smithers. Because he's just there at the haberdashery when the posse breaks in and kills everybody, but they don't kill Sandy Smithers. And I don't know why. I also don't know why he complies. Like, why didn't they just kill him?
I think so. Jody says, or not Jody, Bob says it makes it look more believable that there's someone actually there, you know?
Yeah.
One of them that's not them, you know, it's not their posse, you know?
Yeah.
And which I guess it does, right? And but it is interesting that Smithers complies because sure, he's an old man and he can't really do anything about it. But he was a general in the Civil War.
He was a Confederate general. Actually.
Right. So you'd think he would have, you know, this huge gripe about it. But you know that
he just kind of doesn't care.
Right. He just says, "I don't care about you or them or anybody for that matter." Which I guess I can see that, but you're right. It's weird that he complies, but it's believable. It's believable enough, you know. What's not believable to me is that I find it weird that he's a Confederate general and supposedly hates black people, and yet stays in Minnie's haberdashery.
Yeah,
that I found weird.
That was interesting. Because it's like, because Minnie and Sweet Dave are an interracial couple.
Right, so you'd think that he would have a problem with that.
But he doesn't. And maybe, I don't know.
Maybe he does and you just don't see it.
Maybe he just is there to hang out with Sweet Dave and he doesn't care for Minnie, but he doesn't say anything because it's Sweet Dave's wife. You know?
Well, I mean, it's not like he knew them, because he didn't know Minnie or Sweet Dave. He just stopped there like the rest of them, you know?
But you never see him get up either.
No, because I think they told him to just sit tight in the chair, you know?
Oh yeah, just wait till it's over.
The closest he comes to getting up is
when he reaches for the gun.
Right, and that's the closest time he gets to getting up, and then Warren shoots him and he falls out of the chair. But for the most part, for the rest of the film, he stays in that chair, even when everyone else gets up to go to the table and eat, you know? And I think that's because I think he's a general, right? And he's trained to give orders and follow orders.
That's true. That totally makes sense.
And he was told, sit in that chair, be doughty, be an old man. That's it. So he's following orders like a good general.
Continuing with General Sandy Smithers, it's interesting the coincidences that come up with him, because like it just so happens to be that Chris Maddox and Marquez Warren both show up at the haberdashery at the same time. And they both know General Smithers when nobody else knows General Smithers.
I think it's because, Chris's father fought in the war with Smithers. And Marcus knew him from the war as well, fighting against him. But, I mean, I think it said that Marcus only knew him from reputation.
Yeah.
So, it makes sense that they would both know him because, one, he's his father's son, and then the other, he's fighting against one of the most outspoken Confederate generals, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that makes sense. Plus, everyone else is just, they're just a gang waiting for Daisy to be freed. So they couldn't care less.
I just think that it's funny that it's like the coincidence that happens to Smithers that makes him more than just an old man,
I agree. It gives a great dynamic.
Like, if he was just any other regular old man and nobody knew him, he wouldn't say anything.
Right.
But he just so happens to be General, Sandy Smithers. And that also brings me to something else, too. Because you find out later in the movie that the Lincoln letter that Marquez has is fake.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite things in the movie, but go on.
Which makes me wonder again. If Marquez only knows Smithers from reputation, was Marquez's story at the end of Chapter 3 true? Or was he bluffing it just so he could kill Smithers?
Yeah, see, that's a good question because I don't know either. I think that Marcus was just trying to get rid of him. I think Warren really wanted a reason to snuff him out of existence.
So you think he made up that story?
I think he did.
But then there's also the foreshadowing to the story near the beginning of the movie where, what is the name of the hangman? I can't remember.
John Ruth.
John Ruth.
Yeah.
Is it John Root or Ruth?
John Ruth.
John Ruth.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in the stagecoach when Warren is talking to Ruth, he mentions that people go out to try to kill him all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And nobody knows that. Like, nobody except for Ruth knows that. So, why would Warren craft this elaborate tale just to kill Smithers when he could have said anything else? Or, I guess not. I mean, I guess the thing, I guess it makes sense. Like, it makes sense, the story that he told. But the foreshadowing makes me feel like the story is, there's some factual evidence to the story being true. I think that maybe Marquez told a more hyperbolic version of the story. Maybe the guy showed up and, maybe Marquez just killed him and only found out who he was related to after he killed him. But I think that Marquez elaborated on details with the stealing his clothes and walking him through the snow, just to get Smithers to grab the gun so he could shoot him.
So you think that it actually happened, just not exactly how Warren was saying?
Yes.
I can see that, especially you bringing up, some foreshadowment. But I do still think that once Warren heard about it being Smithers, and once he heard that his son was dead, he wanted to take advantage of that. So he made up a story just to get a rise out of him, which is ultimately why he put the gun by his chair. So
yeah, because that was his entire plan all along.
Yeah,
was to just tell him that story to get him to grab the gun. And I think the viewer gets the impression, almost gets a point of view from Smithers, because when Warren is telling the story, it shows the story playing out to the viewer. Yeah. And I think that's maybe that's not the way that it actually happened, or maybe it's an elaborate tale. But to Smithers, that's the truth, and that's how Smithers saw it happen. And you see from the framing and stuff, Warren looks devious and evil, and he looks like he's the worst man on the planet. Almost to a sense that you feel sympathy for Smithers Kid. Just based on the way that they shoot that I wouldn't even, is it a flashback? Is it a dream sequence? Because it's all based on whether or not the story is true.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what you would call it. I guess I would call it a flashback, but I guess it would be an unreliable flashback because you don't know. But the thing about that story that I love is, in addition to everything else in the movie, it's really one of the biggest things that make you wonder who's lying. Makes you wonder if, or not who's lying, if he's lying. Because the entire movie, you find out everyone's lying about something, right? And
well, was Ruth lying about something? Or Smithers? Because I don't think either of them were lying about anything.
But the thing is, you don't know. That's what I'm saying. Everyone seems to have a gripe about everyone for something. John Ruth seems to not like anybody, right? And he seems to exaggerate himself. Right.
He's paranoid, but each character almost has their own antagonist.
Exactly. And
because, for Ruth and Daisy, that would be each other.
And
for Warren, it's Smithers and Maddox. For Maddox, it's, or even
for Mannix,
Warren has,
for Mannix, it's Joe Gage. He just hates him. For some reason, he just hates him.
And Warren, too. Until, the end of the movie. And then, Warren's got, 3 antagonists. He's got, for the part of the movie, it's Maddox, and then it's Smithers, and then it's Bob.
Yeah.
And then all the gang members, hate everybody except for the old man. The old man hates Warren. It's everybody has their own antagonist. It's almost like a big old game of rock, paper, scissors.
You're right, it is. But going off that, one of my my favorite scene is Daisy playing the guitar, but just after that is the dinner table scene, where everyone's eating stew, and Chris ends up convincing John Ruth that Warren lied about the Lincoln letter. And that's your first
Didn't Warren own up to it during that scene, though?
Yeah, he did. So that's your first time that you figure out, okay, he's a liar. And now you question everything he says. Right? Because that's a big thing to lie about. You were pen pals with the president. That's a big thing to lie about. And John Ruth takes it really seriously. He takes it to heart.
Because it's he thought that they were such good friends.
Right.
And John Ruth saw Warren not as just another bounty hunter, but as somebody he could confide in, And you see that when they get there, he says, hey, I'll protect your 3 dead guys, you protect Daisy, and I'll make sure that we both get out of this alive. And Warren's like, all right, deal.
Yeah.
And that, learning that the Lincoln letter is fake is a breach in trust.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Warren probably didn't even see with Ruth. He just saw Ruth as another guy on the road giving him a ride.
Well, it is, because that's actually exactly how he sees him, because he says, you want to know why I lied about something like that? It got me on that stagecoach, didn't it? So that's actually exactly how he sees him. He sees him as someone who can...
he can manipulate.
Right. And in turn, he has a little monologue on why he has to do that, because being post-Civil War, he has to look out for stuff like that. He needs to make him seem... He needs to make himself seem better than he is, even if he's the most perfect person in the world, because it's post-Civil War. And which, in turn, not only makes you feel for the character of Warren, but you're still also at odds with him because he lied about something so huge. And you not only question everything he says, but you also have some kind of sympathy for him because of probably what he has been through in the war and previously.
The societal implications of, Warren's life past the Civil War.
Exactly. So everything, every lie or every time you think someone lies brings a new layer to the character. And that's hard to do because you're questioning the character. And it's hard to build characterization through lies, but yet Tarantino is able to do it in this film. And I think that's a great achievement.
And I think the Lincoln letter is like the perfect like symbolism for the whole movie itself because it's all based on a lie.
Right.
And in the end, my gosh, Maddox, even though he criticized Warren for faking the Lincoln letter, compliments him on the letter itself at the end of the film.
Right. So he sees
and then he crumples it up and throws it away at the end.
Right. Right. So he sees that it seems at the end he kind of understood why Warren did it. But he still hates that it happened though. But in turn he sees the kind of hard-thinking person Warren is to think of such a personal line for the Lincoln letter of I think it was something like old Mary Todd's calling for bed. Old Mary Todd's calling, so it must be time for bed. And so he sees that in Warren, that he is actually a smart person to think of something so intimate to put in the letter.
Yeah. And and it's almost like with him throwing the letter away, it gives that feeling of, sometimes it's necessary to lie.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could always be thinking into this a little too hard because, only Tarantino knows the meanings behind this stuff, and we're all just like inferring that kind of
course,
shit,
yeah.
And like sometimes that's the thing. Like when you think about like I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but like it's interesting. When it comes to like you and me writing movies, right? We have these ideas and we have these scenes and stuff, but we never have like our ideas for themes to somebody who's watching our stuff could appear completely different or way more deep than what we actually think that they are.
Yeah,
but I think that's part of the fun in thinking and discussing and analyzing films as a whole, because you could everybody pulls a meaning out of a movie, whether or not there is a meaning to begin with.
Yeah, it's part of analyzing.
And it's part of analyzing. Sometimes when it comes down to analyzing stuff, you kind of, to the person who made the movie, you probably look like a bit of a schmuck, because it's like, how when you're in high school and your English teacher is like, oh, the blue curtains represent the pain that the author feels in their heart when they're writing the movie, when in reality it's like, that's just set design, dude.
Right.
There's no meaning behind that.
I remember watching an interview with Jordan Peele about Get Out and all these crazy theories people came up with for it. And he basically knocked down everyone's crazy theories and said, no, the movie's not about that. It's really not as deep as you're making it out to be. It's about this, this, and that. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. It's part of analyzing though. It is what makes part of analyzing films fun.
Yeah.
We're running pretty high on time now. But I think before we go though, let's talk a little bit about the dialogue real quick.
Okay, yeah.
Because that is the meat and potatoes of this film, or the chicken stew, if you will, of this film.
Oh, speaking of chicken stew, do you think that the stew was Minnie's? Was Minnie?
No.
That was a
yes.
thought that I had.
Yes. I mean, yes.
Yeah, that was a thought that I had when they were eating the stew. Because Warren started talking about the stew. He was like, "This does not taste like Minnie's stew."
No, he said
it was Minnie's stew.
Yeah. Because he said that he grew up on a plantation and he had stew all the time. And no matter who it was, no matter what the meat, it always tasted like their stew. And so he was sure that was Minnie's stew.
Yeah, and it's like, and then that automatically, something happened.
Yeah.
Something happened to Minnie, because if that's Minnie's stew, then Minnie was here earlier today. So what does that mean?
Exactly.
I think, because it comes down to, like, what happened to the bodies? What happened to the bodies of Sweet Dave and Minnie? Because they couldn't have been under the floorboards with Channing Tatum, because then the whole place would have reeked of corpse.
Right.
And they couldn't have been outside in the stables or in the back, but they could have been in the stables, because there's a part. Doesn't, like, Bob bar Warren from going to a part of the stables in the beginning? Or something like that? Or he's like, "Oh, you don't gotta do it, I'm doing it on my own. I already did it once today, I can do it again."
Yeah, he doesn't bar him. He says that he wants to do it on his own. And then Warren ultimately says, I'm offering you help in a blizzard, and you're gonna say no? And he says, "You're right."
So either A, the bodies are in the stable, or B, they put the bodies in the stew. Or at least parts of the bodies.
I don't think they put them in the stew, because they would have
noticed it.
They would have noticed a weird taste in the stew, but
it was just a thought that I had when I was watching.
I think you're onto something. Maybe they had them in the stable, because I never thought about, because it's a really quick line that Bob doesn't want his help in putting the horses in the stable. I never thought of that. That's an interesting theory, though. I'm now going to think about that. But back to dialogue. I think this is basically 3 hours of nonstop talking, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And you're never bored.
No, I feel like the dialogue almost has like a rhythm to it.
Definitely. It feels like a song and dance.
Exactly. That was what I was going to say. Like, even if it's just people talking about, even if it's just the posse making up their stories, or if it's Warren calling out Bob, or if it's, Ruth trying to figure out what the hell's going on, or even if it's, Maddox, yelling at Warren for some reason.
Yeah.
There's always a sense of importance in the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's like there's nothing that is said in the movie is never not important.
Which is a great thing to say, considering it's 3 hours long, and it's pretty much all dialogue. What I love about Tarantino so much is that he is so dialogue heavy, and I'm getting this from him. He said that, and I agree with his statement. When he writes his dialogue, he makes things seem like they're unimportant until they aren't. So you have something that is just like, this just seems like random dialogue. What's the point here? Until it comes up later, which a lot of writers don't do. They just kind of make it seem important as the film goes on.
And it also plays into, like, Tarantino's foreshadowing as well, because it's never too heavy of foreshadowing. There's always a little sprinkle of, oh, this might come up later. I never looked at something in a movie. I've never looked at something in Tarantino like with a movie or anything like that of his, where I never go, oh yeah, that'll come back later. I know that for a fact.
Right.
I always get an inkling of maybe that'll be important for later, but it's never like, it's not as heavy as like the necklace in The Evil Dead.
Right.
Automatically when Ash Williams hands the necklace to his girlfriend, you automatically know that that necklace is important to the story, and you need to keep your eyes on that damn thing for the rest of the film.
Yeah, you know something's coming back. You know it's gonna come full circle. Whereas Tarantino kind of buries like a 5-word sentence in a giant, tightly packed monologue, and tells you something important, but you don't even know it yet.
Especially like foreshadowing with the monologue from I don't know his full name. It's
Oswaldo, yeah.
Oswaldo, yes. Like the frontier justice versus societal justice monologue.
Yeah.
You don't that just seems like
it seems random.
You know, it seems random, but it seems natural coming from somebody who's a hangman.
Exactly, yeah.
And you don't realize the significance of that monologue until the end of the movie where they hang Daisy. Which, in my opinion, aside from the scene where Warren shoots General Smithers, that scene right there, I fucking love that scene.
Yeah, you do?
Part of my French, but I love that scene. That scene was awesome.
What do you think about the poisoning scene when they're all vomiting violently?
I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, that's Tarantino.
That's Tarantino. It's Tarantino it's Tarantino to the max is what it is. It plays fun music too while they're violently vomiting. And at first you start out going ugh, and then by the end when John Ruth has Daisy on the floor and he vomits right in her face and she's laughing, you're in uproarious laughter by that point.
And it's the thing that makes it's like it's not just like vomiting like ugh and it's liquid. It's like somebody took a fire hose and stuck it up their ass and pulled the thing.
That
when it just
and it's what makes me love that scene, because it starts out so low key and starts out suspenseful, and then it gradually gets funny and funnier and funnier until John Ruth vomits on Daisy and you're in uproarious laughter. But then she shoots John and you're back to oh crap.
And you can see speaking of John and Daisy, going back to where Daisy lobs off John's arm to get to the gun. Like automatically, like I was sitting on the edge of my seat at that point because Maddox is out cold.
Yeah.
And Warren can't move because his junk is missing.
I love when she hacks off that arm and then she pulls it up, but the force just makes her flip over.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I definitely didn't see anything like that coming.
Right?
She just whips it over her head and makes her fall over. But I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
No, that was it. I mean, there's that whole final 5-10 minutes was just that was just real great.
I love Chris Mannix's monologue at the end,
where he calls her bluff.
Yeah, but when he talks about his father and how she mentions that she has an army, and he's like, my father led an army. He led an army of renegades, and he has an entire monologue on how she's such.
He called her bluff based on his previous experience.
Right. That's I love that monologue, and then he's just like, I don't feel so good, and he just falls back.
Yeah, and it's like
this movie subverts expectations at every turn.
Yeah, and it's interesting because thinking about that monologue itself, he doesn't outright tell anybody that his dad's the leader of the Raiders group at all until the end of the film when it's important. Yeah. You just think that that's backstory for character.
Right. You think that it's some kind of reputation to make Chris seem so evil, because everyone's trying to make him seem like he's evil.
Well, not even like evil, just like unpredictable and almost like not sane.
Yeah, he's the Jeffrey Dahmer, if you will, of this script, because no one knows what he's capable of. Because John Ruth says if he's the sheriff, I'm a monkey's uncle.
Yeah.
So I think that makes Chris's character pretty tightly wrapped. And speaking of tightly wrapped, we are not tightly wrapped. So, we went very long for this episode, but that's because The Hateful Eight is such a great film, but also such a long film, and there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah, and since we watched The Hateful Eight, we kind of watched it on purpose, because the next movie for this podcast, you actually might have to spend some money to go see, because we're going to spend next week talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is the 9th Quentin Tarantino movie, which means there's one more movie he has to make before he's apparently done making movies forever.
Which we'll see. I don't know whether to believe him or not. I hope that's not true. But so for next episode, I hope all of you will see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in theaters. Please go support Quentin Tarantino. Please do not support other blockbusters that I hate. And
also, if you aren't going to go see the movie, I honestly don't think that you should watch the podcast for that episode, because
probably not.
Because I think that movie is apparently very, very good.
Yeah, I've heard it's very good, and it's an alternate history. So
an alternate history.
Yeah, so it's some of the plot revolves around Charles Manson and Sharon Tate, right?
Yeah. So,
Quentin, being himself, he took it upon himself to rewrite history like he did with Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained. It's an alternate history, so what I'm saying by that is that you will probably be very lost if you do not see the film. If you want to listen to it and then see the movie, whatever, but we are saying
we
probably
implore
don't.
You not to.
Right. I mean, we understand, though. Ticket for a movie is $30 these days. So.
Oh, really? It's $30 in Illinois or Indiana?
Well, I'm being a bit of an exaggeration, but it is pretty high.
It is pretty expensive.
Yeah. So anyway, see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Timothy Olyphant, Luke Perry, Al Pacino. Everyone in Hollywood that exists right now is in the movie. So go see it, and then tune in next week for next week's podcast about that film. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Jake and Cole with Cake and Batter, and we are signing off.
See ya.